We made it happen. Jimmy was an incredible success. I don't know where he is. I got to find him. Gosh, I don't. Oh.
Oh yeah, George. Oh, George.
Right
George.
here. Yeah.
We did it, brother.
Yes, we
hey,
did.
Thanks to Dan. You know what? And in the ring with Dan and Benny. Hey, brother, man, hey, he's about the most cat. I just love him to death. I love you. Thanks for having me. Hey, you're the best. I'm telling you, brother. In the ring with
Dan and Benny.
Yeah.
We love you. Thank you so much.
Dan.
Mwah.
Oh yeah.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Dan and Benny in the Ring. I'm Dan Spasciano, joined as always by the playa himself, Benny Scala. Benny, just the boys again tonight. How you doing?
Good. I got a little quick story, Dan, and it was in the year 1984. So what were you, about one at that time, I think? Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So I had to take a business trip to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I was living and working in Long Island, New York, and so back then there was no direct flights to Sioux Falls. It was Republic Airlines was the main airline that flew to Sioux Falls, but it stopped in Minneapolis.
Okay.
So, and I have never been a good flyer, but back then I was a horrible flyer. So on the way back from Sioux Falls, after about 12 beers at the Sioux Falls airport, I stumbled onto I somehow made my plane in Minneapolis, and I'm in row 2, and I'm thinking like, man, I'm shit-faced, but I could swear that guy in row 1 looks just like Prince. And I mean, purple
Prince,
suit and
party
everything,
like it's
5'2".
1999 Prince?
What's that?
Party like it's 1999 Prince?
Same guy, right? And so I said to, and the guy in front of me was about 8'13", which I'm sure was his bodyguard. And I said, "Is that Prince?" And he said, "No, that he's just there. He's flying to New York for a Prince lookalike contest." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "I'm going to this. I'm doing the Elvis one." So, and I knew it was him. But you know, and it was Prince, because when he got off the plane, 8 million people at LaGuardia Airport started screaming. But and you're asking yourself, I'm sure, and so is anybody who's listening, what is the point of all this, and what does it have to do with wrestling? Well, one of Prince's songs from that era was Controversy. And what are we going to talk about tonight? Controversy.
And, you know, we say it on the show, Eric Bischoff has the book Controversy Creates Cash. That's, for lack of a better description, he's talking about good controversy. He's talking about booking hot angles. He's talking about, you know, some backstage drama that kind of adds a little flair. What we're going to talk about tonight, Benny, is not the kind of controversy that creates cash. It's not the good kind of controversy either.
No, it's the worst
we
kind.
were torn. We were kind of torn because we touched on this a little bit last week, but a lot of news has come out in the last 7 days that we wanted to do a kind of a deep dive discussion and breakdown of the story with Vince McMahon. And I want to do it, one, because I really think it needs to be talked about and we should have this conversation. But also, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the social media spheres of wrestling discussion, everybody is so busy complaining about The Rock and Cody and WrestleMania booking that the Vince story is kind of falling by the wayside. And I don't think it should. I think it should get the proper attention. And that's what we're going to give it tonight.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Dan, because I was going to ask you, do you think that was done on purpose, maybe to divert the controversy?
I'm not big on conspiracies, but honestly, I would not be surprised if they pulled the trigger or maybe planned it a little differently to get everyone talking about something different. Now, I have heard the point being made that they're trying to catch lightning in a bottle, as it were, and replicate the build to WrestleMania 30 with the Yes Movement, where Daniel Bryan kind of organically got over and took the spot from Batista. So I've heard that they're intentionally working the angles and the crowds to get Cody that sympathy babyface momentum that the crowd comes. So when they do pull the trigger and put him in a triple threat, or give him, do something where they book him at Mania differently, it'll mean something more. But no, I don't think so. But I would not be surprised if the discussion was had like, hey, we're going to do this thing with The Rock. Let's really go all in because we need them talking about something else.
I heard something, and hopefully it's not true, but I guess ever since this started, that his daughter is now getting death threats.
Yeah, unfortunately, she has been getting harassment. As a matter of fact, it was just earlier today. We're recording this February 6th. It was just earlier today. She deactivated her Twitter and social media account issues, and so social media accounts, because of the online harassment she's getting. Like, your dad's a piece of shit and blah, 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 which I will say, I don't care if you think this is the worst booking decision you've ever seen. What I can't wrap myself around the mindset of people that attack talent. Like, it reminds me you can see, for those of you on the YouTube verse can see the wonders I've got behind me. It reminded me of when Disney released their Star Wars movies, and there was a bit like some of the actors in the movie were receiving like death threats and hate mail. Like it's their fault that you don't like the movie. Like The Rock's daughter, it's somehow The Rock's daughter's fault that her dad is now a board member and getting a WrestleMania title shot. Like I think it's gross especially now with the big story being the way Vince treated women. You're going to attack a woman for something her dad is doing. It ridiculous.
I mean, I get, like in 1980, I get Larry Zbyszko being shot at because it was so real to people.
Yeah.
And I get the fact that he had to be taken to arenas in the trunk of his car. I get that. Jimmy Valiant told us that he never had a car as a heel that wasn't vandalized. But this is not 1972 or 1980. We all know what wrestling is about now. So,
right.
I mean, what excuse is there for something like this? There is none.
Not just what wrestling is about, but she's currently the GM of NXT. Like when William Regal was the on-screen GM of NXT, he was legitimately working the office and he was doing training and he was involved. No one who watches NXT thinks that she's genuinely now in charge of NXT. Like she's booking matches and running backstage meetings and stuff. It's not the the fact that she's getting some kind of hate, like she's doing something wrong, is also crazy. I mean, it's now granted, it's not the Jack Tunney era where people were genuinely surprised to find out that Jack Tunney was just a character and had legitimately no power whatsoever. It was the announcer sitting next to Jesse Ventura that was running the company. But no, I don't get it. I can't defend or explain it. I just can't wrap my head around what brings someone to attack a person with death threats and hate mail over a wrestling storyline that is scripted.
Right. I mean, we're talking about like booking here. We're not talking. I mean, we know it's not real. We know what it's all about. I mean, how could anyone take a booking decision so seriously that you're going to make a death threat on a talent?
Yeah, I don't get it.
It's crazy.
And like you said, this is a booking thing. This isn't, the CM Punk Young Bucks getting in a backstage fight, or years ago when you would stuff with like Hogan and Randy Savage, or in the early 2000s when Batista got in the backstage fight with Booker T, where it was like that was legitimate fight that fans were talking about, like picking sides or whatever. This is a scripted storyline. The Rock didn't legitimately steal anything from Cody or use his board membership to squeeze a title shot because he's some evil, corrupt, crooked villain. This was a booked angle in a scripted show, and his daughter's taking heat for it. And it's just, like I said, I can't wrap my head around it to even pretend like I understand why people are angry at her.
Yeah, same here. It's just crazy.
But we, you said, Benny, we were going to talk Vince McMahon. It's important. It's a big topic to discuss. Obviously, we touched on it last week when we talked about the Survivor Series. That is a 67-page legal complaint The story, I'll give kind of the Cliff's notes. They had signed an NDA. He agreed to pay her $3 million, paid her $1 million settlement, and then stopped paying, or excuse me, $1 million lump sum, and then stopped paying the installments, which would have avoided the NDA. And now she's suing and bringing stuff up. And but in the last week, a lot of news we're going to touch on is several women that worked in the WWE have given interviews or released statements, including Maria Kanellis, the Bella twins, I guess the Garcia twins, technically, Tori, just all kinds of people. And then the story, with the expansion of John Laurinaitis' involvement, and people are starting to do their, you have the crime podcast, you know how it goes. People are starting to detective and put pieces together. The lawsuit says, executive number 2 and spring, blah, blah, blah. So people are taking those pages and going, well, in April, this happened. And then, people are starting to figure out why John Laurinaitis was randomly reassigned as head of talent relations when everybody was voting against it. And then, of course, the statements made by Triple H and Cody Rhodes at the press conference. So, we got to touch on that. But I want to get your thoughts first, and I want to start with this because I think it's such an interesting question, and I'm stealing it from another show. I was listening to Jim Cornette's podcast, and he and Brian Last were talking about it, and he mentioned in passing that this is some of this stuff wouldn't have happened in the old days, and he just kind of mentioned in passing, like, imagine being Bruno sitting at home and reading this and being like, Jesus, all this happened when I was there, whatever. And I thought they were going to touch on it, but they just kind of went past it. So I want to get your thoughts. Perfect world, Bruno's still alive. What does he think about this, being the consummate professional that he was, that worked for 2 generations of McMahons?
I would like to think, obviously Bruno would have been very, very outspoken, like he was when during the steroid controversy. I think Bruno I know he went on Donahue. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he went on Geraldo's show or not, but he was very, very outspoken about the steroids. I don't think he was there with the Mel Phillips, the Ring Boy scandal.
Right.
But I know he did go on TV about the steroids. He would go ballistic with this. I actually think that he would whatever the right word is, just withdraw his induction into the Hall of Fame. I think he'd be that repulsed.
No, I agree. And, some of the names from the past that have kind of come out and said, one way or the other that this is awful, or now I get it. I think it's also important to put a caveat on certain things. I've heard some commentary. I mentioned Jim Cornette earlier, where when the story broke, they were recording live as the story was coming out a couple weeks ago. So when he was hearing for the first time, there were some of the news articles through the New York Times article, and they were kind of laughing a bit, like, oh my God, the defecation and some of the stuff. He kind of threw an offhanded comment that because Brian Last asked him, was any of this stuff going on when you were there? And he's like, the hell no. And if it was, I would ask for an office closer to Vince's or something in passing, like, man, how come Vince never sent any women to me? Understand that some, and I'm sure we'll probably crack a smile here or there tonight that there's no one of any moral substance that supports what happened, even if they're making a light of it. Just given the sheer volume of atrocity, it's not uncommon to meet incidents like this with humor. So, if we make a joke, or if you hear someone who's made a joke in the past, odds are they're just, some people deflect with humor or deal with things humorously. No one that I can think of with any semblance of moral fiber is saying that this was acceptable, or, man, I wish I was there. So, just understand that. But I want to get your first thoughts, Benny, on, you mentioned it, and we both said it, we talked offline too, is we've both read the entire complaint. Given the nature, I want to get your thoughts on the first big part of it, is the statement that was released a couple days ago through his attorney, John Laurinaitis, who has obviously he's been identified. They're pretty sure he's in the lawsuit. He may be executive number one. John Laurinaitis mentioned in his statement that he is a victim as well. That Vince had power over him, and Vince was forcing him to do this, or he was, let me pull his actual statement up for the most part. Yeah, where Vince he issued a statement emphasizing he's the victim as well, pointing to instances where Vince exerted power to control both of them. I'm wondering two points. One, what do you think of that Laurinaitis was a victim here? Like Vince was forcing him to participate in the threesomes and forcing him to have sex with this woman he was sending to his hotel and office. And two, what do you think about the fact that the Laurinaitis coming out and saying, I'm a victim here? Day one, this is a divided front. He and Vince aren't shoulder to shoulder saying, this is all lies. Laurinaitis is basically admitting this is all true, but I was forced to participate and didn't want to.
Yeah, Dan, if Christopher Walken was here, he'd say, first of all, Dan, this is poppycock.
Is that who that was supposed to be?
Yeah, it was I participated in a Christopher Walken impersonation contest at my last job, and I came in third place out of 3, obviously, right? I thought I was good, but apparently nobody agreed with me.
Oh,
but,
no.
No, I mean, I listened to that Laurinaitis' statement, and what I took from it is a couple of things. Number one, I mean, he's not denying anything happened. He's not denying. He's not saying, "Oh, none of that happened," or "Oh, she's wildly exaggerating." Right. All he's saying is, he's saying that I'm a victim too. So that means that to me, I get two things from that. One is that, she's a victim. If he's a victim too, that means she's got to be a victim. And number two,
right?
It all happened. And number three, I think Johnny Ace is turning face. I mean, I think that he sees that his best move at this point is to cut a deal. And I think there's going to be other people, even people who are complicit with Vince, I think that are going to flip and turn state's witness or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, no, and you're right. I mean, and it was weird, the wording, because he did say, the statement from the lawyer reads, Mr. Laurinaitis denies the allegations in this misguided complaint and will be vigorously defending these charges in court, not the media. Like the plaintiff, Mr. Laurinaitis is a victim in this case, not a predator. The truth will come out. That I thought was weird too, because it wasn't, this is all false. It's, I deny the allegations in this misguided complaint. He's saying it's misguided. He's saying,
because he's a defendant.
Exactly. Right? This happened. You're just taking your anger out on the wrong person. I'm a victim here too. I think it's crazy. I wouldn't say turn face, but the other thing you got to factor in, and I want your thoughts. You're a little older than me. John Laurinaitis is 62, I believe. He's more than 10 years younger than Vince. And some of the other people that may be involved in this are in their 50s to early 60s. These are people that are, I hate to sound cruel, but they're going to live probably 20 years longer than Vince does. They've got to do something to clear their name. Statistically, Vince will be dead die within 5 years.
Right.
He's not going to have to deal with the fallout forever. If you're someone like someone in their 50s that's got to live another 20, 25 years with this hanging over your head. Yeah, you got to clear your name quick.
I think that's exactly what Laurinaitis is doing, is just, he's doing damage control at this point, because I think he realizes that if he stays, and he says nothing, I think there's so much evidence. I mean, those text messages, how do you refute those? Unless they're not actually Vince's, but who would go forward and allege something with false text, text messages like that?
No, you're right, and it's not just the text, because that was one of the jokes. Not to, like I said, not to make light, but it wasn't just what was in the text messages. It's the fact that Vince was sending her like whole books, and I mean no offense to any of our older listeners, but I've gotten a couple of long, on my phone here, a couple of like 12 paragraph long short story text messages, and every one of them is from someone Vince's age. No one young girl who's trying to fake allegations knows how to write text messages that look like they came from an old man. So I think just the nature of the text message to me is circumstantial that it came from Vince.
Right. One of the things that I heard in the past couple of days, which I was not aware of, was that the feds actually have already seized his phone. Now, if they seized his phone, not only are they going to see the text messages that him and Janelle Grant sent back and forth,
right?
But I'm sure that they're going to see the messages he sent Brock, his physical therapist, that doctor, and anybody else.
Yeah, and because there were multiple names, and the other thing too is if depending on the scope of the warrant, they might find text messages like this he sent other women that haven't come forward yet. Because that was
true.
I'm going to get. I'll circle back to this in a second. But one of the comments from Janelle Grant's lawyer was that multiple women have been in touch with them either to offer support or seek avenues in which to speak out themselves. So this story is far from over. But I want to, keeping with the John Laurinaitis, I want to read this. This was a statement released from the Garcia twins, the former Bella twins. They said, quote, "We are shocked and disheartened with the recent allegations against members of the WWE. It has been a lot to process since we found out about this past week, just as you all did," implying they found out real time when we did. "This is something we don't stand for or condone from anyone, no matter who they are. We want all women to feel safe and supported in the workplace and in their everyday lives." So let me ask you that. One, what do you think about the fact that they've made it very clear we don't care who the accuser is? If it turns out to be our stepfather, burn in hell, fuck you. But you have to let me ask you that, because he's been in their life for what, 10 years now, give or take. He's been married to their mother.
I think so.
Plus he was part of the hiring process. Like, he was part of the front office when they came in. What do you suppose the odds are that this completely out of left field, or did they at any point suspect their stepdad was a creep, but business being business, they just got to kind of play along with it?
I think they're just doing damage control. No relation to Bailey and Asuka and those guys. They're protecting their name. They want to protect their brand, and that's something they have to say at this point.
I agree. I bet Laurinaitis is sleeping on the couch right now as it goes.
Oh my God! I mean, I believe at one point his wife was still in Arizona during the whole process, but I do believe at some point she did move to Connecticut, and it was still going on. I think at that point, though, it went on instead of his hotel room, it went on at the office.
Yeah, that could be, because that was part of the complaint, was incidents at the office. But continuing with Laurinaitis, I want to get your thoughts on this next point. Let me pull up my notes here. I want to get your thoughts on this next point where, you mentioned it, and we talked about it before. When the initial wave first came out a couple of years ago, when they first started finding out about the hush money and Vince paying the payments and the NDAs, the back when it was still WWE, this was pre-TKO, the board announced they were going to do an internal investigation. And during this time period of the internal investigation, along with the other incidents occurring, John Laurinaitis was fired. He was removed from the company. And then when Vince attempted to come back, Triple H, Stephanie, and Nick Khan all voted no for Vince McMahon's return. He returned anyway, obviously pulling the board, removing several board members, replacing them with his handpicked replacements. And John Laurinaitis was rehired and reinstated in his position at objection of board members, including Triple H and Nick Khan. So my question to you is, what do you think they knew and when? So this is entirely speculation at this point now. What do you think the board knew and when? And do you think they knew Laurinaitis was involved from day one? That's why he was so quickly removed, and they wanted nothing to do with him coming back.
They had to know, because why would they have been so adverse to him coming back? I mean, I think, even Triple H, how did they not know what was going on? Especially when a lot of this was happening right in, at the place of employment. How did they not know?
Yeah, it's a good point. So, you have to think about, You've got a lot of experience in office environments. If you know, the fourth floor, Vince's office was on the fourth floor of the building they called Titan Towers. You know, you're on the four. I think about where like my office is, or where any offices you worked in the past. If somebody is bringing women into their office and doing these kind of things, unless the room is soundproofed or intentionally designed, like remember the allegations from a few years ago with Matt Lauer, where he actually had the sex dungeon in his office, so it was quiet and insulated and all that.
Right.
Unless it was something like that, there's no way you're working in your office, or you're working late and you're at the copier and you see women coming and going at all times of the day, looking disheveled when they leave. Hearing, you have to have heard something. I wonder, and again, this is speculation, but I want your opinion on this. What are the chances that anyone on the fourth floor didn't at least suspect? Maybe it was consensual. Hey, Vince is, banging that paralegal again. But is there anybody on the fourth floor that can throw their hands up and go, I am completely shocked. I had no idea anything was happening, good, bad, or indifferent?
Nobody with an IQ above that of an artichoke. How could you not? I mean, I worked in, corporate America my whole life. And, you got a girl who, obviously was not really qualified to work there. And I mean, didn't have a whole lot to do, really didn't have any responsibilities. You can't tell me that half the place didn't know what was going on there. I absolutely cannot believe that.
Or you would think they at least would at least suspect, even if they were surprised that it was forced, and maybe they suspected it was consensual. There's no way anybody would throw their hands up and not know something was going on.
I really think, and this is something I talked about last night on the True Crime Show, though, is, the whole crux of the matter is, was it forced, versus was it consensual? Because that makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's a great segue. Almost sounds like I'm interviewing you at this point. That's a great segue to the next thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, because you touched on it last night, or talked about it in length last night. I haven't seen anybody support Vince. Obviously you're not going to come out and say, yeah, rapist's good, this is gross behavior. But one of the genuine questions a lot of people have brought up, and I say genuine in that it's kind of universal, and some people feel that it's a real point, is why didn't she just leave? Why didn't she quit? She wasn't chained to a desk. At some point, she was even sent to other states to participate in this. Why did she not leave? But you brought up the point that you don't have to be holding someone down at gunpoint or whatever it be for it to be considered assault. So kind of expand on that thought. The idea of having power over someone is also a level of violence and control.
Well, and somebody in the room said, I think it was called trauma bonding. I think one of the people in the chat room brought that, which I hadn't even heard that. I threw out the term, the Stockholm syndrome. And I think I gave the example of Patty Hearst back in 1974, got kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, grew up as the daughter of a billionaire. And next thing you know, she's in a bank holding an automatic weapon. I mean,
right.
How did that happen? I mean, how do people, intelligent, normal people join Scientology, join cults for years and years? I mean, women, and I'm thinking of what was her name? Janae Rice. Was it Ray Rice, the football player?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's video of him just knocking her into next week unconscious in an elevator, literally dragging her out of the elevator. And then the next day she's blasting the media. How dare you misrepresent, blah, blah, blah. When somebody is in a and I'm not a psychologist. I mean, I don't pretend to be, but I've heard of this before, that, when a woman is in a relationship with someone who is, a very powerful, influential person, they feel so, I don't even want to say threatened, but they're just drawn into the relationship. And I think they feel powerless to leave. And by all accounts, this girl, and we don't really know the whole story, but by all accounts, this woman was very vulnerable. She had just lost her parents. and was financially distressed. I mean, all the right conditions for somebody to just say, okay, well, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. I'll find you a job. I mean, do I think that she might have been enamored with Vince McMahon and would not have minded a relationship with Vince McMahon? No, I think absolutely. But did she want to get in a threesome? Did she want to get her head shit on? Did she want? I mean, I don't think did she want to go out of state? Did she want to send explicit videos? No,
Right.
none of that. But I think at that point she was so far in. We don't know. We don't know what a traumatized woman would do. I'm not a traumatized woman, so. But I have to believe that she just felt helpless.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Neither of us have been in that situation, so a lot of this is just speculation.
It's speculation only, yes.
But if you read the complaint, which we both did, there was a lot of references to payoffs. He would at one point where they said when she was lured into the room with the personal massage table and assaulted, that a secretary brought her, I forget the amount, it was something like $5,000 in gift cards or whatever, and she would come home or find out some picture. Vince would force her to make a picture or make some videos for obviously the person that ended up being Brock Lesnar, and then here's $10,000 to Saks Fifth Avenue or there was that. It's common in what you were talking about, the traumatic bonding. It's common in cases of abuse where the abuser will shower you with affection or some form of apology, in an attempt to kind of balance it out. But it's also what keeps people. And there was clearly, I mean, maybe not enamored, but there was clearly a level of the psychological damage. Once you've been victimized this heavily, like you said, with Stockholm Syndrome, which I wouldn't consider this that Stockholm Syndrome is more, feeling sympathy for your accuser and understanding their cause. I think it's more of, or excuse me, accuser, I meant, perpetrator. I think this is more, she was just kind of had like you said, she had nowhere to go, but it was also a matter of, once you get to that level of abuse, your brain stops working properly. I mean, it's easy to be on the outside looking in saying, I'd rather, I'd quit. I'd rather be sleeping under a bridge, eating garbage, scraps out of a dumpster than get sexually assaulted every day. But I've never been in that situation. So, the brain doesn't work the way the fight or flight response is ruined at that point.
No, and even Brittany Brown, my co-host last night, she said, I wouldn't have done it for $1 million. I said, well, I get that you wouldn't have done it for $1 million. But I said, could there be a situation where a woman felt so vulnerable that she could do it? And she did, she said, yes, absolutely. And I really do think this woman had good intentions. I think she looked at Vince McMahon as maybe even a father figure and a mentor and a benefactor initially. And I think she was so glad to get employment because she needed the money. And it just, I think by the time I think he orchestrated it. This is my opinion, that, he just groomed her. And by the time she was in that deep, she couldn't get out. She felt powerless to get out. I could be all wrong. The facts will come out eventually. And if I'm wrong, I will be the first person to say it, like Fonzie. I was, remember that?
Yeah.
But I won't say I was wrong. I'll say I was wrong. I'll apologize. I'll apologize to Vince McMahon. Not that he'd hear it anyway, but that's my speculation. This is a court of public opinion. We all have our opinions. That's mine.
Well, at least unlike Fonzie, you'll be able to admit you were wrong. So that's the important first step.
And I don't have to jump the shark either.
I don't know. I think he looks better in a leather jacket and floaties.
Oh yeah, he most definitely, yeah.
But moving on, we've got so many kind of points to cover. It's kind of sad to think of. Like I said, several stars have come out. Several, talking about obviously Vince being a creep. Some of them directing their ire towards Brock Lesnar. I watched a clip on Twitter. I'm never going to call it X. From Rene Dupree, if you remember him, and
yes.
Fifi, and he was his reaction was pretty much real time, and he was appalled. And it's like, that is exactly how you should react. But speaking of reactions, in just the last 24 hours, 2K Games has confirmed, based on these allegations, Brock Lesnar is being pulled from all video game releases, and they, without any formal announcement, the cover of the 2K20 WWE 2K24 WrestleMania edition no longer features Brock Lesnar on the cover. Kind of like how AEW pulled CM Punk, except they were butthurt he beat them up, and this is a company wanting to purge a rapist from the roles. So let me ask you your thoughts on that one, Benny. Okay, we've already established we're going to start purging Brock Lesnar. What do you do with Vince McMahon? Do you give him the Chris Benoit treatment and try and purge as much of his history as you can? Do you give him the do you give him the guy that jumped to WCW treatment and just pretend he never worked there? Like, what do you do if you're WWE? What do you do with your history and your videos and your archives? How do you treat Vince McMahon going forward?
If it was any wrestler, I think I would have an answer. But how can I said, off screen, it's like taking mitochondria out of cells. How do you? Vince McMahon is interwoven into every single aspect of the WWE for the past 40-something years.
Yeah.
To me, it seems impossible.
You think about how many big moments where he was on commentary, or the later. It seems they play the clip of the Montreal Screwjob at least once a year. It turns out looks like Bret Hart got the last laugh here. He was right. Vince was a creep and a monster. But then all the stuff with the Mr. McMahon character and his feud with Steve Austin, which was one of the biggest, most profitable periods in wrestling history. That was the highest rated Raw in broadcast history. Over 8 million viewers. Was during the Corporation Ministry of Darkness, Steve Austin at the top, Vince McMahon evil storyline. So there is no way to remove him completely. So assuming you can't remove him completely from history, how do you go forward? Do you just never speak of it again as if he had never existed? Do you address it at some point, or do you just hope for kind of la and hope for the best?
I think at this point you don't talk about the guy, period. And we don't know how this is going to unfold. To me, this is going to be the biggest scandal in the history of professional wrestling, easily. Probably one of the biggest scandals in the history of America, when all is said and done. But we have to see what happens first. I think this is still in its infancy, don't you?
No, I agree, and that's you're absolutely right, being in its infancy, because there are still multiple women. Because remember, he had multiple NDAs. Janelle Grant just happened to be the first one that came to light, and among others, other NDAs. So there's multiple women out there that are going to have to talk. There's probably women that haven't come forward that will now. As I said, Janelle Grant's attorney was on record as saying that people have reached out to them to tell their story. Other wrestlers that are probably going to speak up. No, and then you have to think about it. There's been we talked about it on the show last week. There's been comments like Ronda Rousey straight up calling out Bruce Pritchard. If you want to purge Vince McMahon, you have to get rid of Bruce Pritchard. And so you've got people in the office that are still going to get fired. They're still going to face fallout, and there's going to be a big reset, changing of the guard mentality here. The scandal, it's I wouldn't even say infancy. There's still so much more that's going to come out. And I would not be, like you said, the feds are involved at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the day, somebody that's mentioned in this complaint actually goes to jail.
Do you think it'll be Vince?
I do not, given his age. I think they'll end up with the same crap that's, from, I don't want to compare it, but remember when they finally came to light the Nancy Argentino story with Jimmy Snuka, where he was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial?
Right. Yeah.
And there's been other instances in international courts with, Nazi war criminals who are finally captured and they're 90, and it's like, look, you're guilty, but you're in no state to go to jail or actually be punished. No, I think I think even if Vince does get charged with something, I think at his age, honestly, I think Vince is also the kind of guy that'll die just out of spite.
Yeah, I think he just goes away at this point. But one thing I did hear, and I'm not sure if I heard this correctly or not, is that these NDAs were not properly executed, and they were without the knowledge and approval of the WWE. Is that, do I have that right?
Yes, that was where the big scandal first came out, was that Vince McMahon, a lot of these, he paid these, or he, I should say paid, excuse me. He had these NDAs signed. He paid off these women. Legal didn't know. Some of his cronies might have, but it was completely off the books. And that's where the first round of investigations came from, was he paid some NDAs with company money that was off the books. So you're using company money. It's not like Vince McMahon is paying out of pocket for some of this. This was company money that he didn't clear with the company to spend to pay off women that he'd sexually assaulted, or
Right.
or allegedly, I should say, allegedly sexually assaulted. So yeah, the issue with some of these NDAs too, that some legal experts are kind of debating, is the nature of the payoffs and the nature of the legal. If he didn't go through WWE legal and it's a WWE NDA, then they have no legal standing because he wasn't authorized to issue these NDAs by himself. So
But now,
that there's more to come out. I think some of the NDAs that have been signed are going to get voided in the future.
now his lawyer McDevitt, though, like, did he do this without McDevitt? I mean, I can't imagine Jerry McDevitt would not have had everything all buttoned up.
I'm not sure on that front. Because I correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't McDevitt retire? Like, I thought he retired.
He did, yes. I'm not sure
like,
what year he retired, but yes, he's now retired.
I
Yes.
want to say it was about a year ago. So he would have still been around when some of this was done. But he also, because that was a big thing. If you remember back, I want to say it was last summer. So maybe about 6 or 7 months ago, where he announced he was retiring, and it was in the middle of a lawsuit. WWE was being that antitrust suit that Major League Wrestling brought against them. McDevitt said he wasn't going to represent the WWE in those hearings. So, I don't know. I don't think he would be involved in this. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because, like you said, and then especially her NDA fell apart because Vince stopped paying her. I mean, are we assuming that he paid every penny he owed to everyone else?
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, we really don't know. And, you know, as far as him not paying her, I thought my understanding is that he didn't stop paying her because she had lawyered up. But I think the reason why she lawyered up was because he actually breached the NDA by sharing those pictures, those videos, to people outside the organization.
And that's one of the key parts of it too, is that, where the human trafficking allegation comes from is, he forced her, allegedly in the allegation, he forced her to create pornographic material and then distribute it to people against her will, which, you don't have to, when you say human trafficking, it's not a dirty boat full of immigrants being smuggled in for sex slaves. There's other levels of human trafficking, and you see it sometimes when they crack down on these pedophilia rings, where the children, and I'm not comparing it, I'm just using this as a legal example,
Right.
where when pornographic material is created and distributed without the consent or approval of the person featured in the material, that's also that's covered under the umbrella, because you're trafficking, you're basically distributing sexually explicit imagery of them, and especially in the case of Brock Lesnar, where you're using her sexually explicit material as currency.
I kind of found it odd because Brock, I thought, I found it odd that Brock was drawn into this. It didn't seem to me that he was the type of person that would really get involved in something like this, but we never know.
No, the worst. I mean, obviously, you know, Lesnar's made some business decisions that we haven't all agreed with. The whole, his match, his first WrestleMania match with Goldberg, where the crowd just shit all over it because they knew both of them were quitting the company, and his failed run in the NFL when he tried to play for the Vikings. And Lesnar's done some stuff that people haven't necessarily agreed with, but the only thing morally of this type, I mean, even close to this, was the allegations that Brock Lesnar's relationship with his current wife, who was in the WWE as Sable, started while she was still married to Mark Mero.
Mark Mero, yeah.
So I mean, he's not above not to sound crude, but Brock Lesnar's clearly not above putting his penis where he shouldn't.
Yeah.
But having sex with a married woman is a far cry from the remember the quote in the allegation where Vince told Miss Grant that I showed him the pictures and he said he liked it, and and now I told him you're part of the deal. He wants more. Like, hey Brock, look at these videos that I had this woman take. If you sign, I'll give you $10 million and I'll fly her out to Minnesota to have sex with you. Which then the whole thing where Brock Lesnar got snowed in and couldn't get to the hotel, so she ended up leaving.
Right.
Or she got snowed in. I forgot, but there was a weather issue where they couldn't connect, but she had crossed state lines at Vince's instruction to engage in sexual behaviors, and that was part of the deal. We'll give you millions of dollars and you can have this woman if you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the sad thing is, I mean, Lesnar is the biggest money-making star they've had. He's really the big, I mean, not saying anything against John Cena, but Lesnar has been their biggest attraction. Let me maybe not star, attraction. You put Brock Lesnar's name on a pay-per-view, you're automatically getting more revenue. You're selling shirts, you're selling tickets. Hey, Lesnar's coming to Raw. There's ratings are going to go up. He's the biggest attraction they've had in I would argue the last 20 years. Especially his second comeback, his comeback, I should say, his second run when he the feud with John Cena and then the storyline with Goldberg. But you have to question this, and I want your thoughts on this. There wasn't much mentioned in the complaint, but if this happened, there has to be other wrestlers out there that were promised women as part of their deal.
Absolutely. You know that. And
yeah,
I wonder, I mean, what female WWE talent is involved in this in one way or the other too.
Yeah. The sad thing is you have to think that it is. I mean, hopefully no one on the current roster, and you don't want to imagine, the shady backroom casting couch type scenario where it's like, hey, guess what? But if you remember, Benny, when John Laurinaitis was president of talent relations the first time, he was accused, this was years ago, he was accused, several people who worked at the company, Jim Ross, Jim Cornette, had told stories where John Laurinaitis was literally going through the Victoria's Secret catalogs and hiring lingerie models and bringing them in for tryouts. We're going to make you a star. And of course, I remember listening to an interview with Cornette when he was OVW, where they bring in all these Victoria's Secret models, and they'd be turning purple and gassed climbing into the ring. It's like, I can't do anything with this woman. She, being a supermodel isn't the cardio you need to wrestle.
No.
And if you remember, there was that period in the Divas division where that was it. You had a couple of women that popped up that were clear in-ring talent. Your Gail Kims and Victoria and Ivory. But then you had women, and I give Trish Stratus and Lita credit for breaking the mold, but Trish Stratus was originally brought in as kind of eye candy model, and she eventually learned to wrestle. Whereas, like in the case of Sable, she was brought in as eye candy, and she refused to want to learn how to wrestle. But you look at some of these women that were brought in. That's it. You were eye candy. You were putting matches and great and bikini contests, and that was the way women were treated. Remember Vince having Trish Stratus bark like a dog? You know, you've got these moments that now mean something different, and I don't want to think about that. That I look at some of the women who came in and out of the company in the last probably ever, but 20 years, and yeah, how many of them have at least one story like this?
This will be the next Bill Cosby. I just think that they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep coming, and there's going to be a never-ending procession here. Well, like you said, you already mentioned that her lawyer, Janelle Grant's lawyer, said that her inbox has been inundated with women wanting to come forward.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're going to need here, kind of like Bill Cosby, kind of like, you know, where one or two it was raise an eyebrow, but when you're talking 14, 16, 18 accusers, good, bad, or indifferent, okay, these women are telling the truth.
Right.
You know, it's the idea that, I'm trying to remember how the expression goes, but it's the idea of, you know, one tail is a question, you know, two tails is a thought, and three tails is a truth, or something like that, where, you know, the statistical improbability of a dozen women all coming up with the same exact lie at the same time, you know, the odds, it just becomes mathematically impossible that there's not at least some truth there.
It boils down to the fact that, I mean, the guy is obviously sexually depraved. I mean, so that's one end of the spectrum, and then the other end is, you know, he's a criminal. He's somewhere in between. I guess the question is, where does the needle land?
No, it's I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting, because you have to think something that came up about, I guess maybe it was a week or so ago, where somebody pointed out, and of course the media kind of ran with it. Ari Emanuel, the president of TKO, the new owner, WWE, he owns Endeavor, he owns everything. His daughter worked at WWE offices during the years that these accusations took place. So he has to be taking this seriously. You know, now no one's mentioned his daughter being involved in anything or having anything to say about this, but imagine you buy a company, you're the owner of Endeavor, you come in, you own the UFC, you buy the WWE, you spin everything off, TKO, biggest scandal in wrestling history. Vince McMahon is sexually assaulting and doing all these horrible things to women in the years your daughter worked in that office. There's Ari Emanuel is going to burn that place to the ground, overturning every stone to figure this out.
You know, it's really funny because, you know, I was watching when I was doing the true crime episode, I was kind of monitoring the chat room, and somebody said, "Oh, well, it's not, Vince isn't going to get in trouble. TKO is going to pay their way out of this." And I'm thinking, no, TKO, they are going to distance themselves as far away from Vince McMahon as they possibly can, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, because they did that, if you remember, they did that in the very, very beginning, when their very first statement was Vince doesn't have any say over anything. His position is entirely a figurehead. You know, he's only here because he owns stock percentage. And then Slim Jim pulls their ad, and within an hour, Vince McMahon has resigned all positions and he's completely gone from the company. Right. So yeah, no, they TKO did it right. I will give them credit. They immediately were like, look, one, it's gross, we're taking it seriously. Two, this all happened before we owned anything. No one on the TKO side of the business was anywhere near Connecticut when this was happening. So this is legitimately outside looking in kind of thing. You know, I'm, as you can tell behind me, I'm a huge Redskins fan. If someone were to come out this week with stories of sexual assault in the Redskins corporate office, you wouldn't blame Josh Harris. He didn't own the team when that happened. You go back to Dan Snyder, and that's what TKO is doing. They threw Vince McMahon under the bus, as they should have, and he's going to suffer for his own actions, which, good, I hope he does. You know, to quote Samuel L. Jackson, you know, I hope they burn in hell.
Yeah, they are not going. I mean, I think we've seen the very last of Vince McMahon on any kind of wrestling, any kind of wrestling capacity.
Yeah, I agree. Now, let me ask you this, because we talked a little bit about it off air. One of the real victims here because you kind of pointed out, and we talked about it a little bit, is the other McMahons. I mean, the story came out that the reason Shane may have split from the company is he had an issue with Vince's behavior, and maybe not necessarily he was 100% knew of everything, but he basically said, "I don't want to be like you. I'm out. Peace." He left. Stephanie stepped down, got out of there, and then came back only after Vince left again. Obviously, I'm curious how the fallouts, what Triple H knew and when he knew it, because I said that on when we were on the 30. I hope he stays around because Triple H has done so good for this company. But if you're TKO, you have to take a long, hard look at anyone who worked in that office, including
Absolutely.
Triple H.
Absolutely.
And now it could just be a simple matter of you look into it. Okay, we're going to keep you. But I'm not saying fire everyone in the building top to bottom, but you have to look, you have to do a deep dive into every single person who was in that building when these incidents happened.
To me, the biggest victims, besides Grant, are Vince's grandkids, because kids are cruel. I don't know how old Triple H and Stephanie have 3 daughters, I believe.
Yes,
and they're still relatively young. When they go to school, how do they when kids are cruel? Kids say what's on their mind. Hey,
yeah.
Did your grandfather really shit on that girl's head? I mean, they shouldn't have to hear that.
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
But they're going to hear it.
Yeah. and the sad thing is you have to think about it like David Benoit is somewhat involved in various aspects of wrestling. He's been at events. He doesn't wrestle by any means, but he's been ringside, and I give him all the credit in the world. Apparently one of the few people that kept in touch with David Benoit and kind of monitored him, see how he's doing, and kind of guided him through everything was CM Punk. So that's the reason they have a bond.
Wow, okay.
But to his mention, I mean, let's say he did want to wrestle. How do you get over being Chris Benoit's son ever again?
You can't. You don't.
You
absolutely don't.
Or how Tamina had to kind of drop the entire and changed her finisher and everything. She basically had to pretend that she wasn't a Snuka anymore when what happened with her father came out. Remember there was a short, well, I should say short, but there was a period of time when Charlotte didn't use the last name Flair. Society's just kind of decided that Ric Flair is Teflon at this point. Like, anything that ever comes out about him, it's like, well, that's Ric Flair for you. Let's move on. But which I will say though, I don't think TKO ever rehires him.
No, absolutely not. But we're talking about a long history here. I mean, going back to, like you just said, Jimmy Snuka, which is the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
You got the steroid scandal. You got Mel Phillips, the Ring Boy scandal. You got Rita Chatterton. I mean, how many of these things, at some point, I mean, people who defend McMahon, like, well, that one wasn't true. Well, that one wasn't true. I mean, at some point, it's like, well, that's a lot of stuff. I mean, the old expression where there's smoke, there's fire.
Absolutely.
There's a shit ton of smoke here.
I mean, think about it. I never put 2 and 2 together until we started talking about doing this episode tonight. But we've had, think about how many female wrestlers we've had on this is episode 163. In the last couple years, how many female wrestlers we've had on our show. And I can think of a few times where they've kind of like, I'm not really going to talk. I don't, not straight up no comment, but they kind of danced around the issue of what it was like working with Vince. So I'm sure that locker room was seedy and awful 40 years ago.
I think we're just really try to figure out the psychology of Vince McMahon. I think at some point he in his mind, he was so wealthy and he was so powerful that he could just do whatever he wanted. He was above the law and he was bulletproof. And I mean, it didn't turn out that way.
Yeah. And you have to think, I mean, the one that I thought was really, because you talked about it with the story of Jimmy Snuka, where Vince McMahon showed up to the police station with a briefcase full of something, handed it to the cops, and they just dropped the investigation. The Ring Boy scandal. If you remember the incident, she ended up eventually committing suicide. But Ashley Massaro, where she sued over she was sexually assaulted on a tribute to the troops tour, and Vince basically just threatened to destroy her life if she went public with it.
Oh, that one I didn't know about. Okay.
Yeah,
tell me more about that one. Now, that one I did not know about.
Yeah, you remember Ashley Massaro?
Well, I do remember Ashley Massaro. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I do remember that she committed suicide.
Yeah, she committed suicide in 2019. She was part of I mean, obviously she was part of the concussion lawsuit from a few years before. But the lawsuit was she was sexually assaulted in 2000. I want to get this right. 2007. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was 6 or 7. I knew it was.
Okay.
It was right around the time that I was headed over to San Diego. But yeah, she was sexually assaulted on a military base in 2007 during the Tribute to the Troops tour. And her lawsuit and other things that came from it was that Vince McMahon orchestrated a cover up because, it was just basically kind of buried her and to avoid any of the unfortunateness. So she never got it. She never got justice, and her attorney had released a statement a couple of days ago that basically came along the lines of, I'm gonna read you the statement here, and think about this. Quote, "This doesn't come as any surprise to the followers of Vince or the WWE. The culture was toxic. The sexual exploitation was just part of the overall control. The wrestlers function in an in-group subculture where they're governed by a code of silence called kayfabe." Obviously, we know what that is. "This basically prevents people from speaking out because they'll lose their jobs and livelihoods. My understanding from Ashley, and I think this is well known to anybody with remote familiarity of the ins and outs of WWE, I believe the allegations were Vince McMahon himself was commonly seen kissing the divas in the locker room and so forth. When she rejected his advances, she met the fate of many other wrestlers, which was that her career was going to come to an end, and that's essentially what happened. If you do remember, she was in Playboy. She had a decent run. She kind of got buried at the end, and then went into obscurity. But in addition, quote, and this continues, "In addition to these horrific allegations that she made, it's important for viewers to understand wrestlers have been exploited and injured for decades by McMahon. She has very common orthopedic injuries. She had very serious injuries to her neck, herniated discs, etc. Lacks, this type of lack of engagement with their health crisis, and then it goes on from there. And that's something too. Is Vince McMahon? I mean, he's been dragged before Congress on more than one occasion for stuff like this. But remember the idea that all his talent are listed as independent contractors. So no one gets health insurance. There's no retirement plan. I give him all the credit in the world. If you can, go look up John Oliver. Last week tonight did an entire show on the WWE. And he basically broke down how horrible of a human being Vince McMahon is. And that was years ago. And I mean, it doesn't, when you think about it, like you said, covering up a murder, legal harassment, the steroid scandal, the Ring Boy scandal, the Ashley Massaro scandal. There's every step of the way, the Montreal screw job, the covering, how they kind of tried to bury the plane ride from hell. I mean, every step of the way, the story with, when they said Vince stopped paying her, it's like, well, of course he did. Remember all the stories of him buying the territories and then not paying the promoters.
Well, didn't he stiff Stu Hart out of $1 million?
Yeah. And what are you going to do? Like, I even if you sue me and win, your career's already over because I've destroyed and gutted your territory by the time you get your money. Black Saturday, every step of the way, Vince has been a ruthless piece of shit. I don't think it surprises anybody. That's the sad thing, listening to like Ashley Massaro's lawyer, Maria Kanellis, Tori Wilson, several women that have spoken out in interviews, even the Bella twins. The undertone of their comment, it's, even if it's not "this happened to me," nothing I read in that complaint, these women are basically saying nothing I read in those 67 pages surprises me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it just, obviously the guy is, I mean, he's a ruthless businessman, and there's a lot of ruthless businessmen in this country, but I think he just took it a little bit too far.
Yeah, what I can't get is, and I'm not trying to make light of anything, but Vince McMahon is 78. A bulk of the allegations tied to Janelle Grant's claim and the other NDAs that have been signed in recent years all stemmed between 2015, 2016, and 2020. So you're talking a few year span, give or take about 3 or 4 years ago. Vince McMahon was 75 when he was dragging Janelle Grant into a massage into his private office and sexually assaulting her on a massage table. Like, I mean, I just, like you said, at that point, I mean, there's no way that you start this behavior at 75.
No. This is just this has been going on for years and years, and like I said, I think he just, with his wealth and his power, I think what's that? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Absolute power corrupts.
I just think he thought he was gonna. I mean, obviously, he thought he was gonna get away with it. That's why he did it.
Yep. And I asked you about what you thought, Bruno. It's times like this that I'm saddened by the short lifespan that wrestlers have, because this scandal, there are people that would never pull punches in interviews, that would tell it like it is. Bruno being one of them. I would love to have heard Roddy Piper's take on this. I would love to have heard Dusty Rhodes' take on this, especially with his son being the biggest star in this company right now. And you're taking away from my son's spotlight because you couldn't keep it in your pants.
I'm surprised Jesse Ventura hasn't spoken out yet. Maybe he has, but
I was actually just about to say that. I wonder if he's putting enough, because he'll shoot from the hip, but he's also a smart guy. So I wonder if he's putting the right time together. I'm booking a talk show, something like that.
I would be shocked if I did not hear from that man.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just crazy. But like I said, my final thought, and I mentioned it on the 30, I talked about it on the show a week ago. If 1%, this is a 67-page document, if 1%, if 2/3 of 1 page, 0.67 of this document is true, Vince McMahon needs to be in jail.
Yeah, like I said, there's a needle. Here's the one side, and it's a deviant, and here's the other side, and it's a criminal, and he's somewhere in between. I just, I guess the facts are going to come out to see where he lands along that spectrum.
Absolutely. Well, Benny, I give you my final thought. I said 1%. He's in jail. What are you? Final thought to you. What are you thinking?
I mean, he's had a lifetime history of evading, jail and prosecution. I don't think he's going to want to. I don't think he even gets indicted federally. But what I do think is that you're going to have woman after woman after woman, doing the same thing as Janelle Grant, and for however long this guy lives, I mean, he's going to be in court or paying out whatever wealth he amassed. I think he's going to pay most of it out.
Yeah.
In punitive damages.
I would not be surprised. And I mean, I give it to, again, go back to Jim Cornette, said, Vince, there's not enough time left in Vince's life to undo the deeds, but I mean, it's not just him, Laurinaitis, Brock Lesnar. There are some people who are going to spend the rest of their lives with this stigma, and their careers are over, and good. And I hope more women come out. And like you said, I mean, Vince just recently sold something like $700 million worth of TKO stock, so yeah, start writing some checks, and hopefully, maybe we'll get lucky and somebody will go to jail.
And just to clear the record, I mean, I grew up with Vince McMahon. I watched wrestling on Saturday morning, and Vince McMahon was the announcer, the color commentator. I liked the guy. I always liked the guy. And I mean, when you think about it, like the sexual scandals aside, I mean, what an amazing story. The guy bought the company from his father for $1 million. And I mean, he didn't even have the money for it. I think he paid him like $250,000, and he had to make 3 more payments.
He paid him with his own money too, because he was secretly paying him with profits he was making running the company.
Right. But I mean, like now, I mean, George Steinbrenner, of course, you got to throw the baseball reference.
Of course,
Bought the
there it
Yankees
is.
He bought the Yankees from CBS, I think, for $12 million.
Yep.
But what are they worth now? How many billions? Same thing with Vince. I mean, how much? It's a great business story, but from an ethics perspective, it's absolutely horrible.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, like I said, you see it behind me. Dan Snyder bought the Redskins for $800 million, ran the team into the ground where they were the worst rated franchise in the NFL, and still sold them for $6 billion.
I have to do this. I think it's Mark 8:28. What profiteth a man if he gains the whole world and he loses his soul? I mean, so Vince McMahon, he's got billions and billions of dollars, but he is like morally overdrawn, completely bankrupt.
Yeah. I do believe, though, if you're the kind of person that Vince McMahon is, I don't think he's losing a second of sleep over what people think or his reputation or his soul.
No, not at all. No.
He's crying himself to sleep in his mattress made of money, and probably has women on the side as it is. So with his little twirl 1950s porn star mustache. You either dress like an old cigarette ad, or he's about to tie up a woman and throw her on the train tracks. Creepy bastard.
Yeah, it's like a cross between Snidely Whiplash and Wayne Newton. I can't.
That's funny. I actually said it was a cross between Dick Dastardly and Wayne Newton, but
okay, we got it. Yeah.
Benny. I mean, I'll tell you who is. You ever seen that meme of the black guy behind the tree rubbing his hands? Looking forward to, who's doing that right now? The producers of Dark Side of the Ring, because they've got their next 5 seasons planned out.
Oh yeah, it's a gold mine.
Yeah, good luck for them. Well, I mean, I wish we had a better topic, but this is something that we needed to talk about, and hopefully we can get it going from there. We got a lot of good stuff coming up in the future. Obviously, our podcast can be listened to anywhere podcasts can be found. And thank you to, again, on YouTube, our friends at Monty and the Pharaoh. We'll be on the 30 on Thursday, where I'm coming back for my title, you cheap bastard. And
well, I'm not the defending champion anymore. So
I know, but you got it from me before. I'm still mad. I lost it the first time.
Well, I lost because of a very controversial 7-point penalty for disrespect.
Yeah, well, it was as controversial. That's the kind of controversy that creates cash. Good controversy that people.
That's good controversy. Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, you talk baseball references. I said it on the show. I would still be champion, but their points are about distributed as accurately and fairly as an Angel Hernandez strike zone. So
yeah,
it's rough. But no,
there's corruption right there.
Right. We love them to death, Benny. We got a lot of good stuff coming up in the months. So for the playa himself, Benny Scala, I'm Dan Spaziano. Have a good night, everyone, and we will see you next time we're in the ring.